Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Medicaid Monday. Just a few housekeeping notes. Your lines are muted. Type questions for our speakers in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We sent the presentation to you in your Zoom link, but you can also find it at pierrolaw.com/resources under Medicaid Planning. After the program, please fill out our survey. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Today we have Lou Pierro, founding partner of Pierro, Connor & Strauss, with Frank Hemming, Senior Associate. We also have Gina Lettieri, Care Coordinator at EverHome Care Advisors. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Beth. Welcome, everybody, to our second 2023 Medicaid Monday webinar. And this one, we're going to cover the new NYIA process, the assessment process that took the state by storm last year and continues to plague us. We had a January webinar that you can find at pierrolaw.com/videos. And the January seminar covered all the Medicaid eligibility information, the financial eligibility. We're going to review a bit of that today. But if you want to see all of the details of Medicaid financial eligibility, go ahead and check out the 30-minute webinar that is on our website. We are taping this program, and we will be showing it to you on Monday at noon. We have people, Frank Hemming, Gina Lettieri, who are presenting in the webinar, who will be here to answer your questions in the Q&A, and they'll also hang around after if there are more questions as follow-up. So with that, this is our law firm, Pierro, Connor & Strauss. We have offices across New York State. We practice elder law and estate planning in addition to business law. And this is EverHome Care Advisors, and Gina is our special guest today from EverHome. And EverHome is a care management company, and they provide in-home assessments, care planning, ongoing monitoring, care coordination. They provide advocacy, and you're going to see in today's presentation that advocacy in the Medicaid process is absolutely essential. They're teaching individuals and caregivers how to adapt to technology. There is a suite of services called VivaLinks that they utilize and employ. And we work with them in our law practice because, Frank, we're not social workers or nurses, and that skill set is very, very necessary in the Medicaid process. So we're going to talk about the numbers, updates on the NYIA assessment process, advocating for hours and how to get the care that you need, the immediate needs procedure and how that has shifted of late, and the impact of staffing shortages on care. And with that, Frank?
So more numbers, right? Every time I come on the screen, it's usually to talk about numbers, and everybody's eyes glaze over just a little bit. But we're not going to spend a lot of time because we went through this on last month's webinar. So again, good news, numbers are up for 2023. So if you're a single individual looking to stay in your house, your income limit got upped from $954 last year to $1,583 this year. And your asset limit, we will talk to about on the next slide. If you're a couple at home, again, we got an adjustment up $739 from last year. And that community spouse, so that is when your spouse is on Medicaid, you are not. If you're the community spouse, your income that you're allowed to have also went up $280.50, all the way up to $37,1550. Only number that didn't go up is that bottom number, that $50. If you're in the nursing home on Medicaid, you still only get $50 because that's been that number since 1965. Still is that number today. And resources, these went up quite a bit, right? Last year, it was $16,800 was your asset limit. Went all the way up to $28,133 for this year. Again, couple at home can't double that number, so went up from $24,600 all the way up to $37,902. Again, that community spouse number on the bottom stayed the same as it's been, $74,820. So if you're a community spouse at home with a spouse on Medicaid, you can shelter about $75,000 with no questions asked. If you want more, go watch last month's.
So in session one, we covered the eligibility, exempt assets, non-exempt assets, how to transfer assets, and the penalty and look back rules. And just to remind you, home care, Medicaid home care has no look back period as of today. We're anticipating a 30-month look back as of April 1 of 2024. We went through that in detail last month, so we're not going to cover that today. But the question then becomes, we can get people on Medicaid home care. We can qualify them financially. We don't miss that target, but then what? Then what happens? And then it's going through this new morass of protocols and procedures. And for that, we are using and referring to an aging life care coordinator. And there is an association called ALCA, and we're very, very happy to have with us today Gina Lettieri from EverHome Care Advisors. And Gina, you want to talk a little bit about what you do as a care coordinator and how it impacts the Medicaid process?
Sure. Life care coordinators are also known as geriatric care managers. We look at an individual not only for their psychosocial well-beings, their medical problems, their ability to stay within their home or wherever they would like to be for their end of life or, rest of life care. We go in and we do assessments. We see what would be successful for somebody to be able to remain in their home. We do planning. We look at the education that's necessary for families to be able to advocate in specific situations where they might be in a hospital or in a nursing home. And we coach the family caregivers on how best to care for an individual.
I became a believer in geriatric care management 4 years ago when my mom got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I could not put a care plan together for her, even though I was an elder law attorney and at that point chair of the elder law section of the State Bar Association. The resources just weren't there. So I hired a gentleman by the name of Joe Jackson, who was a very, very highly skilled geriatric care manager, is what we called him then. And he put that care plan together, found my mom aides, got her into a home care plan that lasted for several years, where she stayed where she wanted to be at home. So life care coordination and elder law really work hand in glove. And we need each other because the legal financial piece dovetails with the care and medical piece. And now we have NYIA. So Frank, who the heck is NYIA?
NYIA, so we will probably routinely throughout this webinar call it NYIA, that is short for New York Independent Assessor. That is essentially the assessment program that is put in by New York State that goes in and actually evaluates people once they have been found to be financially eligible for Medicaid to make sure that they are medically eligible for Medicaid. They are nurses, they are doctors, they are skilled professionals that are contracting with the state, with the New York Independent Assessor's Office to actually administer something called a UAS, which is an assessment tool, conduct medical evaluations, and then make recommendations as to whether that person can remain at home, be safe at home, and then all of that collected information that they have then gets put together into a care plan, and then ultimately a number of hours will be awarded to that person. We're going to go step by step through that process, but that's essentially who they are, why they're here, and why we're looking to talk about them.
And that is the meat of today's presentation. And when we look at care in the home, that's where people want to be, but the solution to this is not easy by any means. If you have sufficient resources and income, you can private pay and hire private aides. It's probably giving you a much better chance to find aides because you can pay them a higher scale than Medicaid would reimburse them. County offices for the aging now have home health care aides. They have hired, again, under the tutelage of Greg Olson and Rebecca Prevey, the offices for aging have become staffing people, and they have aides that can go out and help to take care of people in their home. That's not Medicaid. The Office for Aging is not a Medicaid agency. It's pre-Medicaid, if you will, before people have to spend down and get to the Medicaid eligibility levels. And then we get to the Medicaid reimbursement. And folks, don't let your seniors, don't let your clients believe Medicare is going to cover this, because it will not. Private long-term care insurance, your own pocketbook, and Medicaid, that's where we're at. And Gina and Frank, the Medicaid program isn't just one program.
No, I mean, we see most frequently the ones that are listed now up on the screen with either the managed long-term care program or the agency model. So we may refer to it as NLTC, we may call it agency model. It's all kind of one and the same in a lot of respects. There is that consumer-directed program that is also listed under number 1. That is kind of the lifeblood of the current system that we're seeing because of the shortages and other things that we're going to discuss today. That nursing home transition diversion waiver program is a great resource that we use frequently for people with cognitive issues and cognitive deficits. We have the traumatic brain injury waiver. Sometimes people need different services that need to be administered because they've suffered a TBI. Sometimes that's early in life, sometimes that's later in life, but we do use that if it's appropriate. And then that last one, PACE, that one's much more of an all-inclusive network of physicians and care plans and everything that gets put together for people. That one, I always just like to throw out whenever we talk about it, that one is much more limited in scope just because you have to live within certain geographic areas to qualify for that. So as much as we like the PACE program, the people that we've had in it, I think have had generally good results. Not everyone could qualify that one just because it's a product of where you live.
Gina, we find that which program is going to apply depends upon two major factors. One is, what is the person's primary diagnosis? What are they suffering from? The other is, where do they live?
That's correct.
What kind of caregivers are going to be available in that community? So very often we reach out to you at this stage where we're actually applying for Medicaid and trying to determine which of these programs is the most appropriate, because they vary in how they treat different illnesses, whether it's dementia or physical ailments. So just talk a little bit about what your assessment process is and how you would navigate through this choice.
So the first thing that we do is we actually sit and talk with the individual. We go to their home. We find out what their needs are. So we're able to direct them to the program where they can get the best services. For a lay person to understand all the different types of services out there, it's very, very challenging. And they don't know what to do, and they feel like they're looking for that needle in a haystack. And once we get involved and we're able to talk with them, we can guide them into where they can get the most successful care for them to remain in their home.
And I know that the family becomes part of this as well.
Absolutely.
So you're talking to find out who are the available resources. Can the children be caregivers, which may lead you to the consumer-directed
Correct.
personal assistance program? Is there an agency that has staff? And I know that you are on a first-name basis with all the agency heads trying to find care. And that's really the game today.
I think it's really important for the prospective clients and loved ones who need assistance to understand that we have developed relationships with people in our community. We know who to contact, and it helps smooth the process a little bit better.
So once we make the choice, we get the financial eligibility, which is Frank's job. We then determine which program we're going to target as the best solution for this particular person. And then we begin the NYIA assessment process. So Gina, just walk us through step one and what this entails.
Sure. So the very first step when enrolling in an MLTC program is an independent assessment that NYIA will do. And that assessment's conducted by either, well, it's actually a registered nurse that works for NYIA who comes in and does an initial assessment to see what ADLs they need help with, what IADLs they need help with. That is the very first step. However, getting a hold of them to schedule the first appointment can be very challenging. You know, it's not uncommon for me to hear that people are waiting 45 minutes to an hour just to connect to one person to find out it's not the right person. And then they start the calls over again.
And Frank, you work with our clients through this process. What's your experience?
Very similar. It's frustration. It's lack of knowledge of who to call. The other big difference that we saw when this whole NYIA process took over was under the previous regime, pre-NYIA, we would usually submit our Medicaid application. And then once that was submitted, confirmed by the county that it was in process, we would direct our folks to start calling Maximus to start their assessment process. Because the assessment process has always been within this model. It's just a matter of who's doing it, when they're doing it, all that good stuff. So we actually were having people assess to begin their care plans prior to that Medicaid application being approved. And you just had to make sure that your approval then came within a certain time period, or unless it would expire, you have to go through the process again. Now, what we're hearing is that NYIA will not book people for their assessments unless they're showing active Medicaid coverage. And that's a huge difference than what was previously happening, because before we were getting kind of this part out of the way while the application was with the county. Now we have to get that application completely through the county. And then in many cases, if we're using a pooled trust, if we have somebody with excess income, we have to get that pooled trust set up. We have to have that disability determination done. We have to have that pooled trust funded. We have to have proof of all that to the county, and then they have to activate the Medicaid coverage and then get all that info over to NYIA. That way, when that phone call comes in after that 45-minute wait, then that they're showing active and they're actually going to schedule that assessment. And if you've got one, and if even just one of those things goes sideways, you don't even get here. And then you have to start kind of all back at the start and figure out, well, where did we go off the rails and what can we do to fix it?
So we're from the government. We're here to help you. I've been doing this 40 years, and every time they have a Medicaid redesign team, they redesign it to make it harder to get access to care. So that's intentional, folks. That's so that the budget does not get overinflated with things like the consumer-directed personal assistance program or the nursing home transition diversion waiver program. And so we have to now navigate through these rules, but we're professionals. Imagine an individual, a layperson, who is going through this process, trying to figure out all of the nuances. That was step one. This is more of step one.
That's correct. Yes, so the community health assessment is actually the second assessment that happens for the individual who's enrolling in the program. One of the difficult challenges that we're finding is they are doing these programs through Zoom. And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of individuals who do not have computer access. Access to Zoom becomes very challenging. So the wait time to get an in-person evaluation is much longer.
And Gina, you've had some personal experience with the technology and bringing technology to the client in their home, a tablet that they can use for the assessment, but it doesn't always work.
That's true. Certainly, I could highlight multiple situations, but you know, going into the home, setting up the Zoom computer, and then being able to connect in with them. You have a very short window of 10 minutes, and if there's a glitch that goes on with any type of a connection, either on the NYIA end or the client end, you could wind up losing all of your time and not actually being able to complete the assessment.
And then sometimes they don't show up on the other end.
That is absolutely true too.
And so that's not an uncommon experience. Unfortunately, then you get to step two. If you get across the first hurdle, then you get to the medical exam. And Frank, we used to rely very, very heavily on people's own physicians, and we would get a physician affidavit and submit it with every Medicaid application. And it became part of the application. They erased the doctor.
They did. And again, this was most likely done for budgetary reasons and to try to make this harder and all the good things that we're seeing with the challenges that come with this of seemingly in the best interest of the consumer and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, they're just making it harder. That's why today's program is titled the way that it is, why it's getting harder to do all these things. But yeah, I personally, I've gone to a fair hearing before, and I've had the Medicaid applicant who is grieving something, whether it's lack of hours or lack of a decision or whatever it is, actually testify and say to an administrative law judge, this is my client, this is my person I've been treating for X number of years, this is the services they need. I put all that in writing. I'm here today to testify on their behalf. But this is exactly what they don't want to see now, because they have now this independent doctor that then will meet in person with the Medicaid applicant. They're not familiar with their history. They're not familiar with their family. They're not familiar with, the home or any other just aspect of the case that might go into their overall recommendation of what's going to work for this person, what isn't going to work for this person, what they need, and what maybe they don't need so much help with. And this is just showing more and more that you have to just make sure that you know kind of the hurdles that you're going to see before you even go down the road. That way you can work with qualified people to make sure that you're actually getting every I dotted, T crossed, and make sure that everything is lining up properly, even though they're putting all these hurdles in practice.
And our practice is to continue to get the physician's statement, even though we're not going to have the ability to use that physician, just to have it as part of the record, so that we know what the actual needs are prescribed by the patient's own physician. Gina, what's your experience with the independent physician?
It has not gone well. The determinations that they're coming up with do not even touch on the amount of care that individuals need to successfully stay in their home. So the number of hours that they're determining really put our clients at risk.
So you've got two assessments, the NYIA, an independent assessment, and then the physician independent assessment. And after those two assessments, you have no answers other than, okay, you can continue on to step three, but you don't get to step three till you go to step 2.5. And that is, if you need more than 12 hours of care, then what?
Right. So then you have an additional review that comes into the home to either agree or disagree with the number of hours that were originally granted. And honestly, it's not working. People aren't getting the hours that are needed.
So the actual determination goes back then to an MLTC, Frank.
Yes, so that they're the ones that they take all the information, they take, the UAS information that was collected first, they take that doctor's recommendation from the second visit, they look at anything else that was done, and now this step 3, and then that MLTC then typically will then make an award of hours, and then they have to inform the Medicaid applicant of, this is our decision, this is what we're recommending for you, and they do put in writing, this is why we're making this recommendation. It's the ones that I've been seeing recently, it's, we're awarding you 5-6 hours a day because you have other ways to keep yourself safe at home, whether that's the use of specialized equipment, it's you have the ability to not drink fluids after a certain hour. You can get around your house without assistance. You can use other things to make your life easier. It's just whatever they can kind of come up with to put in writing to justify less hours. In my opinion, that's what we're seeing, rightly or wrong.
Yeah, and this is not new. It came about when MLTC started, when Managed Long-Term Care was the product of Medicaid Redesign Team 1. And you could see what was happening, the handwriting on the wall. The process was being put into the hands of people that were getting a capitated payment, one payment monthly to take care of people, and then determining how many hours they need that were going to draw down the amount of money that they were getting on a monthly basis. So to award 24 hours a day, that's a losing case because you don't get paid enough for that 24-hour-a-day case. And it became a dynamic that resulted in a report done by a number of groups, Valerie Bogart's group, NYIA, the New York Legal Assistance Group, a group that we rely on very heavily, and the Bar Association. They did a report called Mismanaged Long-Term Care, and they tracked fair hearing results on appeals of our awards, and they found that the MLTCs lost 99% of the fair hearings because they were imposing a standard that was not the state standard. So this is an area for advocacy for all of you, an area where you can jump in and help people through this process, and appeals become necessary, unfortunately. And Gina, this is our flow chart. So walk us through this to get to an aid in your home paid for by Medicaid.
It's daunting. First we start with scheduling that assessment, the community health assessment, followed by the clinical assessment. NYIA then will send the outcome to the applicant to inform them that yes, they've been approved. Once that gets done, you have to determine which MLTC options are available for you, and then you have to choose that option. And most people don't know what options they have.
And it varies county by county.
It varies county by county. Yes. So the MLTC plan is the one that actually approves the number of hours. Once you have that done, then you have to select, are you going to do an agency model or are you going to do a consumer directed model? Most individuals, as we've said, access to funding is not forever. At some point they need to change to a different program. So when we get to the consumer directed program, we notify the care manager, then they have to select the fiscal intermediary. Then you have to identify who the caregivers are, hire the caregivers, and then train them. And it's a lot. It's a lot for an individual to manage on their own.
And Frank, families that are our clients, we get them financially eligible relatively quickly.
Generally, I mean, it's the nice thing about not having a look back period is that as long as there's not many hurdles to jump over, we usually can have financial eligibility within a month or two.
Which is fantastic because the rest of this process takes 6-8 months.
This is exactly why it takes as long as it does now. It's not necessarily the financial piece, it's this.
I know that our clients are unhappy through this process, and they're unhappy with us through this process, although we try to warn them in advance that it's going to be months before there is a final determination on the award of care. But in this process, there is also a lot of room, Frank, for advocacy, and sometimes a well-placed phone call can turn things over.
Yeah, we have had talks with the care managers at the MLTC plans to basically say, can you just walk us through your determinations? Can you explain something on the UAS to us? We have medical evidence here from the doctor that really disagrees with your decision. Is there anything you can do to reconsider? I mean, honestly, the model that they have now developed to go against an MLTC's decision first has to involve something called an internal appeal.
Right.
Where the MLTC has to essentially be given an opportunity to review all their records and their determinations and really decide, do we really want to stick with this or do we want to make a change? Sometimes, I would say rarely, unfortunately, but sometimes they will make a change where it's enough that now the client is then satisfied that they're now receiving what they were supposed to. If that is not resolved within that internal appeal, then you have the option for an external appeal. There have been many other cases where Gina and her group have successfully gone to external appeal and gotten something changed there. And then again, client continues on. Now they've got their adequate determination. If we either don't want to do an external appeal or you didn't get that result that you wanted at that external appeal, then you're going to fair hearing, which is before that administrative law judge, where we're going to lay out the medical evidence, we're going to have testimony, and we're ultimately going to leave it in the hands of the administrative law judge to say who's right, who's wrong, what hours are appropriate, what isn't.
So the current reality is that people are struggling.
Yeah, so Gina and I thought it would be best to actually use a real life example. So Stanley is a client of ours. He's age 66. He was born with cerebral palsy. He has epilepsy. He has some other issues. Stan is a great, wonderful, intelligent guy. He needs a lot of help. He's been privately paying for 16 hours a day. He went through all the process that we just walked you through between the NYIA assessment, the independent doctor visit, everything. And the MLTC came back and awarded him 5 hours a day. EverHome filed a grievance with Gina. Well, we got a positive result. They didn't keep it at 5. They bumped him all the way to 6. So thank you so much for that. We have in writing from his primary care doctor that he needs at least 16 hours a day of home care for his daily supports. That 6 hours a day does not cover all those things because of just the level of care that he needs. And the MLTC has stuck their heels in the ground and they said, we're sticking to 6 hours a day. So now we're going to hearing about this. And we wanted to kind of just see if we could really have something that could show everyone just how people really feel about this. And Stan's quote was, having worked for 30 years for New York State for 2 large departments, Department of Education and Tax and Finance, for a combined 30 years of time as an income tax auditor, one thing is consistent in New York State, and that is that their reform standard. Anytime the governor and the legislature do a reform to improve services and efficiencies, it's always a disaster and an epic failure, which resembles a bad rendition of Who's on First.
And their worst nightmare is someone who is articulate, intelligent, but needs care.
Right, which he is. Clearly.
They can advocate for themselves. Those that have dementia, that have Parkinson's, that are not able to advocate for themselves, need advocates to go through this process.
Right, and he is kind of the worst nightmare, I think, for them in that way, because he is going to present as a very needy person because he is. He's also going to present as a very intelligent person because he is, and he's going to present, I think, much differently than how he was laid out to be on paper by the medical exams and the UA.
So what's the next step for him?
Hearing. We're waiting for a hearing date. We actually received a hearing date and we had to ask for an adjournment because we didn't have the evidence packet prior to the hearing. So we had to ask for an adjournment because we didn't want to go fight against something where we didn't know what the other side was saying.
Yeah, and you're entitled to that evidence. We can do a whole program maybe later in the year on fair hearings and appeals. So looking at this is a system that is broken. And the question becomes, Gina, how do people get through this if they don't have Medicaid in place? They still need care.
They still need care. Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
Trying to find money, trying to find the caregivers, that's something that very often, again, you need assistance and advocacy because no one is trained to do this, either as a patient or as a caregiver. This is all new stuff. So home health aides, the difficulty to staff cases is something that's been recognized nationwide, worldwide, and in particular in New York State. And so we have COVID challenges, people have left the workforce, and a depressed wage scale that we had a meeting last year, our Elder Law Forum, which will come up again in May 11th. And we talked a lot about the wages for home health workers and home care workers, and they are not competitive. So how do you get people and how do you recruit home health aides? It becomes very difficult, and it's not just an impact on home health care.
It's not, no. Staffing shortages are everywhere from hospitals to nursing homes. And, ultimately people wind up waiting to get into a nursing home just because they don't have the staff to adequately care for the people they have in the home already. So units close. And then you add COVID into all of it, and it just makes it a more difficult, challenging situation.
So I know we have about 400 people on today's webinar, and I know many of you are advocates across the state, and you do work in this area. These are some of the things, and again, we'll do a session on advocacy later on in the year and fair hearings and appeals. But know that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you have to butt up against the system in order to get your clients the care that they deserve. And we think that that physician statement, even though it's not part of the formal process, is invaluable. You go to an administrative law judge and say, well, his doctor says he needs 16 hours of care. That's going to be probative and very weighty evidence to that ALJ. So nursing homes are not admitting people in many cases, in many areas, because they just don't have the staff. They have COVID fears. There are all kinds of things. Hospital ER rooms are now overcrowded, waiting to get in, people in ambulances sitting in the parking lot. And all of this is backing up, and it has a dramatic impact. Governor Hochul has a master plan for aging, and it's under the tutelage again of Greg Olson for the Office for Aging and Adam Herbst from the Department of Health. And they're going to be looking at ways to improve the system and to bring solutions, real solutions that can help New Yorkers navigate through this very complex aging process when you happen to need care in your own home. There are some bright spots. Technology is one of those bright spots. Emergency medical services, now those people can act as paramedics, or will be able to act as paramedics if all this goes through. And so there are some things that will help ease the burden on hospitals, ease the burden on nursing homes, and bring better care into the home with less necessity for all of the hours that might otherwise be needed. We are very much following this and working with the people doing it. And Gina, life care coordination becomes part of everyday life for those people who are trying to put all these disparate pieces together.
Yeah, it's really incredibly important to have somebody by your side who understands the system, who understands what's available in the communities, and to be able to advocate for them, because lay people just don't have the connections to do so.
And I was a layperson, even though I was an elder law attorney, and I didn't have the connections to do it without a care manager, and that's the truth. So Medicaid Mondays, this is our second in our series for 2023. The next one will be March 13th. We'll be talking again about the legal side of Medicaid asset protection trusts and walk you through how those work, why those work, some recent challenges where Medicaid asset protection trusts have been denied. The applicant has been denied because of the assets in the trust. And we'll walk through all of those things and how to construct the trust properly so that clients can get the care that they need when they need it. And remember, the Elder Law Forum, which will explore all of these areas, and we're hoping to have representatives from all the major government agencies, legislators, the governor's office, and we're going to try to bring to you the current state of affairs and what the future may hold so that you can help prepare yourselves and your clients for this aging wave. And the baby boomers are just starting to come through. They've been on Medicare for 10 years now almost, but they're not yet in the area where they're going to be needing chronic care in large numbers. That's coming very soon. When it does, all of these games change dramatically because we don't have enough care now. And when the boomers hit, we aren't even going to be close. So the 28th Annual Elder Law Forum, I hope you can join us. We're going to be talking about the past, present, and most importantly, the future. And we hope that you've had an opportunity to post your questions in the Q&A, but now we're going to turn it over to Frank and Gina, and they'll be able to answer your questions live. I want to thank you for joining us today. Gina, Frank, thank you for lending your expertise to today's program, and we hope to see you on March 13th for the next edition of Medicaid Mondays.